Now, the definition of a sample. A sample is a subset or portion of the population being studied, which has the same characteristics of the larger population. So some examples would be, in our previous example, we had a simple random sample of only 30 beetles. Another example, if we were interested in learning about all black bears in California, we could take a sample of only 149 and capture them throughout the state. Or another example of a sample would be 1,000 adults randomly selected within the United States, or 30 students selected at random from Los Medanos College. Now, we can also calculate descriptive statistics of a sample. But a descriptive statistic of a sample is called a sample statistic. So examples, if we calculate the mean of a sample, then the mean of a sample is called a statistic of the sample. If we calculate the standard deviation of a sample, then the standard deviation is called a statistic of the sample. If we calculate the variance of a sample is a statistic of the sample. And we can calculate the proportion of a sample. The proportion is called a statistic of the sample. So a sample statistic serves as a point estimate of an unknown population parameter. And something to point out about samples and populations. So you can see here, if we're talking about the mean of a population, then we use this Greek symbol mu, which looks like an M. We use the Greek symbol mu to talk about the mean of a population. But if we're talking about the mean of a sample, then we're going to use a different symbol, X bar. And similarly, if we're going to talk about the standard deviation of a population, then we use the Greek symbol sigma to represent the standard deviation of a population. But if we're talking about the standard deviation of a sample, then we use lowercase s. And if we're talking about the proportion of a population, then we just use letter P. But if we're talking about a proportion with a sample, then we use P prime. So we need to use descriptive statistics on both populations and samples. But because population samples and samples are two different things, we need to have symbols that differentiate the mean of a population versus the mean of a sample. And again, finally, to highlight this last point, because it's often very costly or time consuming to actually get information about a population. So we take a sample, a smaller number, and that smaller number, that sample descriptive statistic that we get becomes our point estimate, becomes an estimate for an unknown population parameter that we're interested in.